Industry is so vital to modern life that we have to live with it, and so does wildlife, like this hedgehog. I know from personal experience because for years I was an engineer by profession and a naturalist by inclination, and now I'm a professional naturalist. Well, this land here has seen similar changes too, because for 8 centuries it was part of the great estates of the de Gresley family, and then the change came here too, because the land was sold to build this power station, and now a great complex of cooling towers and roads and buildings have changed the rural scene. One of the biggest problems with large stations like this is the disposal of thousands upon thousands of tons of waste ash. All these thousands of tons of ash are the waste products of the coal that's burnt in the power station. The ash is swilled down great pipes into lagoons where it's left to settle, and then the water's drained off so that the waste can be removed without blowing fine ash all over the countryside. Not a likely place you might think for a nature reserve, nor for a chap like me, a naturalist, to be at all interested in. But you'd be quite wrong on both counts. It was this very problem of ash disposal that acted as a catalyst to create the first nature reserve here at Drakeholes. Well, how did that come about? The basin of the River Trent is famous for gravel pits, and when the gravel's been quarried, the countryside's left pitted with holes which fill up with water. In 1966 it was proposed to use some of these pits to dispose of the waste ash from the power station. But many of the pits had become famous as resting places for migrating waterfowl, so there were objections from local bird watchers. To try and resolve this problem, a meeting was called between naturalists, the Nature Conservancy Council and the Electricity Board. The result happily pleased everyone. Some sites were chosen where wildlife would not be jeopardised, and these were filled with ash, skimmed with topsoil, grassed over and returned for grazing. At other pits, wildlife was encouraged and a nature reserve created. One of the joys of letting things grow wild is that you can get a wonderful mixture of plants and trees and wildflowers that make a superb habitat for butterflies and moths and other insects. And the odd thing to me is that some of the commonest things are also some of the most beautiful. And where there's plenty of food and nesting cover, the wild birds settle of their own accord. This reserve here at Drakeholes, it's not just a sanctuary for birds, it's a sanctuary for bird watchers too, because they've built hides that you can get into out of the weather and see and not be seen. But look at these hares. Oh, isn't that a lovely sight? Jacking. 2 hares going round, and she won't let him though, she won't let him. You always think of hares mating in the spring, but they go right on through the season. And these two are still going round. Look, she keeps going away from him. Still trying, but I don't think she's going to comply. Anyway, let's get into this hide and see what we can see from here. Hello. Anything much about?
Yeah, that's quite good.
Oh, lovely, isn't it? Borrow your glasses a minute.
Sure.
Sure. Nice, nice young pied wagtail. Lovely little birds, aren't they? Lovely variety here, all these water birds, coots and so on. You can see why they call them baldy coots. Over there's a plover, peewit we call them, one of my very favourite birds. Ubiquitous duck. Oh, lovely, isn't that nice? A grebe on her nest, and she's absolutely conscious that we're watching her through this slit in the hide. Lovely's just shuffling her eggs under her so they all stay the same temperature. Ah, heron. I wonder if that's one of mine, because my own reserve at home's only a few miles away, so it easily could be. Isn't it a marvellous thing, you know, that despite this sense of solitude, and despite the wide variety of wildlife that lives here peacefully, we're still only a stone's throw from the surging jets of ash that sparked off the whole experiment. But to my mind, perhaps an even more important result from that meeting in 1966 had nothing to do with ash or gravel pits, but it concerned the land surrounding the power station, which is used as a natural screen. Why not, someone asked, why not use this land to provide a nature trail for the local education authority? And so they did. And now, not only power stations, but many substations too have nature trails. This is Canterbury substation, one of the first of such sites to have its surrounding land developed as a nature trail. Although not open to the general public, the chain of pools provides sport for the local angling club, whilst Tony Harmon, the resident warden, has a superb outdoor classroom. Tony, you've got an enormous caterpillar there. I wonder if any of the children know what that is.
Do any of you know?
A moss caterpillar.
It is a moth, yes. It's a puss moth caterpillar. And he's feeding, as you can see, look, chewing through that leaf.
Well, what are they going to do next then, Tony?
Well, they're off to do some bark rubbing, aren't you, children?
Yeah.
So, if you'd like to go and find Mrs. Ferris,
Yeah.
we'll see you later on.
No, down there, that's right.
Right, well, we're going to have a look at these bridges.
Right, yeah.
Phil, I think you'd be interested in those.
You've got a lovely sort of wetland habitat here. It must hold a tremendous lot of birds of all sorts, I suppose.
Oh, yes, it does. Let's go across this bridge. This is one of the bridges made from pylons and railway sleepers that we mentioned.
Very practical.
Yes, very useful indeed to get across
Nice
water.
tame old pair of mallards.
Yes, hello then.
Have you had a good season so far for nests, Tony?
We've had a smashing year so far for nests, lots of them, and many in excellent positions for children to be able to see them from the trails themselves. I can remember early on, for instance, I took a couple of children round to get a closer view of the dove's nests, and we had some superb views at really close range. Now go steadily through here, Paul, because there's a collared dove's nest I'd like you to have a look at. If we go up behind this tree quietly, we should be able to see her on the nest. Gently does it. Yes, there she is. Can you see it up through there, look?
Where?
You got it, Nicky?
Yes, I see.
Isn't she nice?
Yeah.
Right, now we'll stay here. We won't go any closer because we might disturb her, and she obviously is a little bit uneasy.
Why is she moving about like that?
If you watch, she's getting herself comfortable before she actually sits down, but she isn't really too happy. She knows we're here. Now we're quite close here, look, to a moorhen's nest. See how she's flicking that tail? Now if you look at those white tail feathers, that's a warning signal. Now you can see that even though the nest is close to the water, the reeds are keeping the eggs nice and dry. She's just going off through the reeds. Now if you just look round on this side, much further over, look, you'll need your glasses for this. Just look through there, you can see another pile of reeds, and there's a bird coming to it. Look, it's a coot, similar nest. Got it in focus?
Yeah.
Jolly good. See that? She's adjusting the eggs, turning the eggs over, because they have to be turned, otherwise they don't incubate properly.
Do you think there'll be plenty in the trap?
Well, it was a nice warm night last night, so there's no reason why we shouldn't find plenty. Yes, you can already see stuff around the collar. We'll just take the lid off, gently, and not to disturb things, and see what's inside. Put that down and then take the collar off. Oh, look, here's a nice large moth. Do either of you know what that one is?
Poplar hawk.
Yes, it is a poplar hawk. Now, you can hold that if you like, Kay. Would you like to just hold your hand out? Transfer him on, look. Yeah, he's quite active. One of our largest moths. Well, that family is the largest. Oh, look, just a minute. Look at this. This is rather something rather special here. What sort of an insect is that, then?
Oh, a water beetle.
Yes, it is a water beetle. How can you tell?
Because of
The long legs?
the long legs.
Yes, for swimming. Now, this is one of our biggest beetles, and it's a very rare one. So I think it's worth taking us back to the centre to show the others. Can you pass me that box, OK? Sew him in. Now, this is one of our best reed beds for warblers. Yes, I think I can see one there. Look, about halfway down in the reeds. Can you see it?
Yeah. Oh no, she's going.
Don't worry, because if she is incubating, which she probably is, she'll come back within a few minutes. Did you hear that bird song?
Yes.
That was a very good bird. That's one of Britain's rarest birds, a Chetty's warbler. Now there she is. She's coming back to the nest now. Look. Coming up to go into the nest. Right, lads. Well, we're going out here to try and find a decent reed bed where we can cut some reed maize, take them back to the centre and dissect them, and then see what sort of animals live inside. Now just look over there, lads. I'll have to stop the boat here. Can you see those two baby coots in those reeds over there? The mother can't be far away because they're very young. Yes, there you are. Look, you can see the parent bird. She's diving for food. And when she comes up, can you see the baby birds going up to a beak and pecking something? That's almost certainly weed, because they dive for food, unlike the moorhen, which doesn't dive for food. Well, not very often. There you can see there's both parent birds there now, look, and they're both actually feeding the young. The young just sits there and waits for them while they do all the work. Right, well, let's press on and get on with our project, shall we? There, wasn't that lovely? The parent wren bringing food to the young. Look at that.
What was that she took away?
What do you think it might have been?
It looked like a bag of some sort.
Well, you're almost right. It was, in fact, a little tiny bag, rather like a plastic bag, in which the parent bird takes away the droppings of the babies. Then it keeps the nest clean, and she takes it right away and drops it, which makes sure that predators don't know where the nest is.
Mm.
And so it's really been quite a good year, and generally speaking, I should think we have 20, 30 nesting species.
Lovely. Let's go and have a look a bit further round.
Yes, yes.
Ah, hello, children pond dipping. Nothing I love better at my age.
How are you getting on? Right, let the water drain through then, and then bring it up.
What have you got? Have you got anything very interesting yet?
Turn the net inside
Turn it.
out. That's it. Completely inside out, and then rinse it in the water and see what happens.
Don't squeeze anything. That's it.
That's it.
That's
Right.
it. Oh, really? Oh, you've got some little things that are popping around quickly there. What are those? Do you know?
Who's your partner? She had a go? You had a go?
Yes.
The
Would you like to have one more
water boatman, I
each,
think.
and have another go each, and see if we got enough then?
I think it's a wonderful way of getting children really interested, don't you? Because fire and water are the two things that really attract them, aren't they?
They always like pond dipping most of all, I think.
They do.
That's a nice place to dip there.
Fairly close to the bottom.
keep the
I
net
think there are all
sideways,
sorts of
keep it
interesting
sideways.
things on the bottom. You got much in there?
Keep it moving, keep it moving.
It may seem a far cry from those children pond dipping in a peaceful pool at Canterbury to the rugged rocks of this river at Rydal here in Wales. I'm standing a few hundred yards upstream from the hydroelectric station at Rydal, and the common factor between this and Canterbury is that both have nature trails. And during the summer months, visitors here were able to wander along the river banks amid some of the most magnificent scenery anywhere in Wales. Wherever there are large sheets of water, rivers and lakes, there's always a chance there'll be fish. So it's not surprising that an industry that uses millions of gallons of water a day should be interested in the protection and preservation, even the propagation of fish. And here at Rydal there is a fish rearing unit that is one of several that supplies fish for stocking lakes in Wales. When the eggs are hatched, the young fish, or fry, They're kept for a while in shallow tanks, and the thing that takes my fancy is the simplicity of the little water-operated wheel that rations the food out to them so that nothing's left to foul the water. Some miles away at Trousfinnith, the warmed water from the nuclear power station's used in another fish-rearing unit specialising in rainbow trout. The warmed water, together with a special diet, encourages the growth rate of the fish, and at feeding time the water boils with excitement. The two units now function jointly, so there's an interchange of fish between the two locations. Those reared in the warmed water at Trousfinnith, however, must be acclimatised before stocking out into the cold mountain lakes. Meanwhile, back here at Rydal, the little steam train so beloved by children and summer visitors chugs its way along the mountain side. Across the valley at the fish farm, some of the fish are being prepared for transportation to the mountain lakes in the area. After netting, they're counted into tanks and loaded onto a Land Rover trailer. It may take some time for the fish to reach their new home, so it's very important to pump oxygen into the water to make sure that the fish have a comfortable journey. They pass through some superb Welsh scenery on the way to the high lakes, where they're to be set free. Whoops! I thought we'd got mutton for the main course. Once at the lakeside, the fish are transferred into a tank in a boat. It isn't possible to use oxygen pipelines here, so they keep the water aerated by splashing more in from a bucket. Far out on the lake, the fish are put carefully into the water, a few at a time. Now, this is because trout reared artificially sometimes hang around in shoals, and the object here is to distribute them as widely as possible. Whatever season of the year you come to Wales, the scenery is dramatic and it's a delightful place to be. But we can't all be lucky enough to live in such surroundings. And over on the far side of England, at the northeast, at the mouth of the Tees, there's another nature reserve with a nature trail that's different from anything we've seen so far. On this cold, bleak morning, the grey shapes of industry testify to the importance of Teesside as an industrial centre. But what interests me as a naturalist is that the reclaimed land on which most of this industry now stands was once an important resting place chosen by migrating birds because it was the only salt marsh for 200 miles along this coastline. So it's not surprising that the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds has been and still is concerned about the diminishing area that's left to these birds. But when the tide goes out, the birds still move in. Waders and herons congregate here, and sometimes even shy seals come out onto the mud flats. It's thanks mainly to the efforts of the RSPB that there's a much better understanding of the problem by the large industrial concerns, including the Electricity Board. And about the least likely lodger to take advantage of their hospitality is this escaped flamingo, which is happily settled here. No one would like to be without electricity, but let's face it, the equipment does nothing for the view. As we've seen, the board tries to mask power stations and substations as much as possible behind a merciful screen of trees. The woodlands that form these screens often cover acres and acres of land, which has to be fenced for reasons of security. And because of this, the land is undisturbed, and it makes an ideal habitat for a large variety of birds and animals and plants, including at one particular site a weird assortment of fungi. All over the country, more and more land's being made available for nature reserves and nature trails, and in some areas for leisure pursuits of the general public, such as fishing, bird watching, and even good old-fashioned walking. It's a marvellous thing, you know, that no matter what time of year it is, if only you take the trouble to look, there's always something of interest happening in the countryside. A fox, if you're lucky, at dawn or dusk. Charlie Fox, we call him in the country, after the immortal Charles James, on the prowl for a pheasant or a rabbit, I suppose. And the muntjac deer, the smallest deer to run wild in the countryside, not much bigger than a fox. The ancestors were brought by the Duke of Bedford about 100 years ago, and he brought the grey squirrels too. Foresters don't like them, they call them vermin, but they're beautiful things to watch. And little owls, the smallest species of owls, and they live largely on worms and do no damage at all. And also living on worms, the badger, one of my favourite animals, as English can be. And I think that I'd rather see a badger on a summer evening prowling round for worms and beetles than any animal I know. From spring through summer to autumn, when leaves turn to gold and eventually fall to the ground. For some it's a time of great activity, gathering food to tide over the long cold months of winter. And winter provides the setting for the last episode of our film. And I like to think that what we've seen so far is a good example of attempts made by progressive industries like the board to come to terms with a natural question of the balance between industry and nature. Here in Snowdonia, at the far end of this lake, an imaginative engineering scheme called the De Norwich Project includes a plan to build a power station and yet retain the superb rural atmosphere without putting either the views nor the wildlife at risk. Behind me, in the heart of this mountain, completely out of sight, they're building the biggest pump storage power station ever constructed in this country. And when it's complete, millions of gallons of water a day will gush from these culverts into the lake in front of me. The snag is that the surging torrent might dislodge the deposits of slate and copper on the bed of the lake that were left there by mining operations generations ago. This might pollute the lake and the river below, killing alike the plants and the wildlife. But it won't happen because the lake has had to be isolated and the river diverted around it, so that will preserve the river below. But Arctic char, which are a very rare species of fish, have lived in this lake for thousands of years, and they come up at this time of year in the dead of winter to spawn. And so they're being very carefully netted and taken to the 2 fish farms to breed, after which they'll be released in a beautiful isolated lake high in the mountains above. And here are some of these Arctic char from Dinorwic. Before we brought them here, the scientists had them up in the fish hatchery to strip them of their ova or eggs to try and get a new generation. And we've put them in this bin here in the water so that they get to the same temperature as the lake before we release them. Here they are, beautiful, beautiful pink-bellied fish. Their ancestors were in lakes like this in prehistoric times, and I'm going to release him here now in the hopes that he will swim away and his descendants will be safe for all eternity.